she said, jumping up. Unbelievably, she was happy. And really far too excited that she was about to meet a family of vampires. Get dressed, I'll wait here, I said, walking with her to the bottom of the stairs. She bounded away looking positively luminous. She was in good spirits, but I could also hear the way her pulse had started racing. It was probably the most nervous I'd ever seen her, and while I'd like to think her nerves were for the right reasons, I was sure I knew her better than that. She took her time getting dressed, and I wondered if she was finally succumbing to the foolish notion that she needed to wear something special or waste time primping her hair to ensure everyone's approval. It really wouldn't matter to any of them what she was wearing, though I couldn't help thinking the more clothes the better. Anything to cover up a few more inches of her skin and dilute her scent, even if only helped fractionally. After what seemed like an unnecessarily long time, she appeared at the top of the stairs with a strained smile on her face. Okay, she said, hurrying back down to me. I'm decent. She was in such a rush that she fell right into me. I reached out to help her regain her balance, and in the process really stopped to look at her outfit. I'd never seen her wear a skirt before. It was unlike her, though I had to smile at the fact that she'd put on my favorite blue sweater. She really had been paying close attention. Her hair was pulled back casually. I didn't want to insult her or make her feel more awkward as she walked into this already uncomfortable situation, but I wished she would have kept her hair down. With her neck and throat exposed like that, I'd probably have to introduce Jasper from the next room. 76. Although I had my concerns, she did look lovely. More feminine than I was used to seeing her, and it just accented the color in her cheeks. I pulled her into me and let my fingers trace down her back. She relaxed into my arms and hugged me back. It was enough to almost make me forget about the whole meeting the family thing. I was tempted to scoop her up and take her back to her room so we could lie together blissfully again, wrapped up in each other and forgetting the world. Wrong again, I whispered, breathing in the smell of her hair. You are utterly indecent. No one should look so tempting. It's not fair. Tempting how? She asked. I can change. There was a slight hint of panic in her voice as it finally started to occur to her what she was about to walk into. I might have been happier at her sudden flash of self-preservation, but I was overcome with the desire to feel her lips on mine again. You are so absurd. I laughed, kissing her forehead. She was beautiful, warm, and wonderful, and she was in love with me. Shall I explain how you are tempting me? I teased. I ran my fingers up and down her back, enjoying the way it played with her erratic heartbeat. I felt myself instinctively start breathing harder as she brought her hands to my chest, touching me lightly and looking at me with such longing. Slowly I leaned into her and my lips met hers. It was completely different than the last time when I was so preoccupied with controlling my other desire. I wasn't worried at all about the burn in my throat this time. I was too absorbed in the way her soft, perfect lips caressed mine. So confident in my control, I allowed my mouth to open just slightly and took one slow, beautiful breath of her. 1 second I was lost in her touch, the next I was catching her limp body. Bella, I said, frightened I had somehow managed to hurt her. You made me faint, she panted, and I sighed in both relief and confusion. What am I going to do with you? I said, wondering if we were ever going to be able to kiss each other without her having some bizarre reaction. Yesterday I kiss you, and you attack me. Today you pass out on me. She laughed, the color rushing back to her cheeks. It made me nervous the way it still felt as if she were about to fall over. I held her tightly to me, afraid to let go. I didn't know much about the fundamentals of human relationships, but being able to kiss without her needing resuscitation was probably on the list. So much for being good at everything. I mumbled. That's the problem. She gasped. You're too good. Far, far too good, remembering the only other time I'd seen her collapse. I asked. Do you feel sick? No, that wasn't the same kind of fainting at all. She said, looking a little embarrassed. I don't know what happened. I think I forgot to breathe. I can't take you anywhere like this. I said, smiling. Good. I didn't really want to leave anyway. The day would be much better spent trying to figure out the mechanics of kissing without fainting. Perhaps if she was already lying down. I'm fine, she said, interrupting my thoughts. Which probably was for the better. Your family is going to think I'm insane anyway. What's the difference? 77. Actually, they thought I was insane, but I'd already learned to deal with that. I stepped back to look at her, making sure everything was back to normal. Well, normal for Bella. She seemed confident enough, which was ludicrous really, but I couldn't help but be proud of her bravery. Even if she was afraid for all the wrong reasons, she was still willing to face her fears for me. "I'm very partial to that color with your skin," I complimented, trying to ease her silly insecurities. She blushed again and looked away, but I could see the grin on her face. "Look, I'm trying really hard not to think about what I'm about to do, so can we go already? And you're worried, not because you're headed to meet a house full of vampires, but because you think those vampires won't approve of you, correct?" I asked, just to make sure that really was all she was afraid of. "That's right," she said too quickly. "You're incredible." I smiled, shaking my head. It was crazy, yet I loved her even more because of it. She cared about me enough to want my family to like her. Although it was difficult to think of us by conventional standards, I knew that her desire for their approval was something any boyfriend would be glad to have his girlfriend to feel. I walked her to her truck and opened the passenger door for her, clearly indicating I still didn't think she was in any condition to drive. Besides, it would be far too difficult trying to explain the way to my house. It was something you more or less had to just feel. Bend in the road, odd formation of trees, hidden pathway to the dirt road that led the way to our secret sanctuary. It wasn't exactly the type of house one would expect to find anywhere near a town like Forks. Esme had designed it decades ago, but Carlisle wanted us to find a place we felt like we could really get settled before building it for her. The Pacific Northwest was everything we could ask for, so he gave her her dream home. The design was actually a tribute to both Esme and my time as humans, perfectly crafted to fit the early 1900s. The fact that it was so near the forest was convenient for hunting, though of course we preferred to go farther away when possible. It was beautiful too, and I loved that I could hear the river from my room. Something about the sound had soothed me during my endless nights. The nights before I had Bella. The nights that no longer mattered or existed. I glance over at her as I parked the truck in front of my home. It was nice to finally be able to share this with her. Her eyes were wide, taking it all in. "Wow," she breathed, and I was thrilled to see how mesmerized she was. "You like it?" I asked with a grin. "It has a certain charm," she said, trying to sound indifferent. I laughed and ran my fingers through her ponytail, still wishing I could ask her to take it out. Oh well. They'd need to get used to having her in close proximity. And I would hear if it was getting to be too much for any of them. "Ready?" I asked, as I flew around to open her door. "Not even a little bit, let's go," she answered, choking out a laugh for my benefit. She reached up to touch her hair. "Let it down, please just let it down." Then her arm fell to her side and I snatched her hand up in mine, determined to keep her attached to me the whole time. "You look lovely," I assured her. I heard her heart start racing as we neared the door. I tried to comfort her by tracing the back of her hand, gently squeezing it to let her know I was staying very close. I wasn't certain, but I-78 had a feeling being surrounded by so many of us at once might trigger the reaction I'd been expecting her to have all along. I opened the door and led her inside, keeping her hand firmly in mine. Her eyes widened as she saw our large front room. Esme and Carlisle were waiting for us near the piano, keeping their distance until I officially invited them over to meet her. Of course I should have figured Alice would have told them to expect us. I might have been irritated at her for not being able to stay out of it, especially after our conversation last night, but in truth I was glad they had all been forewarned. I also hoped she would have pleaded with Rosalie on my behalf to be on her best behavior, and reminded Jasper of my previous request that he keep his distance until he was absolutely positive he was in control. Overwhelmed by the house, it took Bella a few moments to even see them standing there, but when she did they all exchanged warm smiles. "She really isn't afraid at all, is she?" Esme thought, and unconsciously I squeezed Bella's hand again. "No. Never afraid of the vampires. Only their approval as my adopted parental figures. She's so relaxed, so at ease with him. Truly remarkable." Carlisle's thoughts mirrored Esme's perfectly, in sync even in their minds. Figuring they were right and she really was comfortable enough, I decided to start the introductions. "Carlisle. Esme. This is Bella," I said formally. not quite sure how to go about introducing someone they already knew so much about. "You're very welcome, Bella," Carlyle said, taking a few hesitant steps towards her. He reached his hand out and she quickly shook it. "It's nice to see you again, Dr. Cullen," she smiled, clearly pleased with herself at being able to shake off her nervousness so well. "Please, call me Carlyle, Carlyle," she repeated, her smile widening. Amazed at how well she was handling it. I relaxed my grip on her slightly, though there was no way I was letting go of her hand. Esme walked towards her and reached out to her lovingly. She was absolutely beaming. "Such a lovely girl," she thought. "It's very nice to know you," she said kindly. "You've made him so happy." "Thank you. I'm glad to meet you, too." I could tell she was genuinely excited to be there, happy to be welcomed into my life so completely. I didn't know how she was doing it, but she was acting as if we were just a normal family. Maybe that was really how she saw us. "Where are Alice and Jasper?" I asked. I assumed the rest of them were close by, trying to space out their entrances so as not to overwhelm her. Confirming my suspicions, the second Alice heard her name, she was at the top of the stairs, one arm around Jasper's waist and the other enthusiastically waving at Bella. "Hi, Bella," she called enthusiastically. "Finally. What took you two so long?" I rolled my eyes. This was going to be interesting. She glided down the stairs in one quick motion, obviously not concerned at all about easing Bella in. She was determined to just be herself. Then, to all of our astonishment, she leaned over and kissed Bella on the cheek. Bella was clearly surprised but didn't appear to be bothered by it. 79. "Welcome to the family," Alice thought cheerfully, and I instinctively tightened my grip on Bella's hand again. She looked up at me and I forced myself to calm down. "It was just Alice being Alice. You do smell nice. I never noticed before," she added casually, and Bella's face turned a deep shade of red. I wanted to be mad at her for making such an inappropriate comment, but other than Bella's obvious embarrassment, no one seemed to think anything of it. Carlyle and Esme just glanced at each other, amused by the whole thing. After a few moments of silence, silence for Bella. I was stuck listening to my family dissect every minute change in her expression, every uneven beat of her heart. Jasper slowly and carefully came down to join us. I could tell he was taking in the atmosphere, surprised by how relaxed it felt given the events he'd just witnessed. "Wow, you might not even need me," he teased. I shot a quick glare at him. "Oh, sorry. That's right. You'd prefer I waited outside." I wanted to be irritated at his attitude, but honestly I was just glad his thoughts were focused on giving me a hard time and not on Bella herself. "I'm fine, Edward." "Really?" he thought, watching my expression. "Trust me, Alice would never forgive me if I did anything to mess this up." That at least I could believe. She'd probably been lecturing him all day. Besides, if there was any chance of him slipping up, she would have seen it and made him stay away. She was almost as protective of Bella as I was. As much as I was trying to hide it. I could tell Bella had caught onto my unease and I felt her tense slightly at my side. Feeling the change, Jasper let a wave of calm wash over the room. I looked at him skeptically. "What? Can't hurt, right? Hello, Bella," he said calmly, opting out of the handshake most likely for my own sanity. "Hello, Jasper," she replied politely. Then smiled warmly at all of them. "It's nice to meet you all. You have a very beautiful home, so calm. Completely at home here. Where is she getting the courage to just stand there like that? Why isn't she panicking? Just wonderful. A truly rare creature indeed." Their thoughts all jumbled together as I watched her in odd silence. My beautiful Bella, making friends with the vampires. "Thank you," Esme said, then added to me. "And thank you for bringing her. I've been so anxious to meet the girl who's stolen your heart. We're so glad that you came." I couldn't have been happier as I looked around the room. The ones I loved, together and smiling. Then I noticed Carlyle glance at me, his eyes narrowed just slightly. "I assume you've seen Alice's vision." I nodded, small enough I knew Bella wouldn't see. "She thinks they'll be here soon. It's getting clearer. I wasn't sure if you would want to burden Bella with this. She's doing so well, but knowing they're coming would surely frighten her." 80. You would think. I thought to myself, shrugging almost invisibly at him. "So you're planning on telling her?" I looked over at Bella, whose attention had been drawn elsewhere, still taking in her surroundings. I would be keeping close by, and although I happily reminded myself she would probably like that, I was certain she would notice the change in my mood. Until they were gone, I couldn't let my guard down around her. I wouldn't be able to simply relax and lose myself in her the way I'd already started to grow used to. Alice and I would be on high alert, both using our powers to their fullest to keep the girl we loved safe. I nodded again at Carlyle and he smiled. I guess she has a right to know. She's sort of family now. It's lovely watching the two of you. I can tell she trusts you completely. Joyfully I smiled back at him and began tracing the back of Bella's hand again. The fact that she was standing so confidently beside me was proof of her trust. She'd put her life in my hands, and I'd spend eternity making sure no harm ever came to her. I looked over at Bella again, and she was eyeing the grand piano that had occupied my time for so many otherwise dull and boring nights. Do you play? Esme asked. Bella frowned and shook her head. Not at all. But it's so beautiful. Is it yours? No, she said with a laugh, then glanced at me. I thought you'd told her all your secrets, she teased. Oh well. I'm happy to take care of this one for you. Edward didn't tell you he was musical. I rolled my eyes at her. Always the proud mother. No, she said, looking at me indignantly. I should have known. I guess. Esme seemed confused by the comment, so she added. Edward can do everything, right? Yeah, kids got nothing better to do at night. Jasper thought, a small laugh escaping his mouth. However, are you going to keep up with all your hobbies now that your time is spent entertaining the human with vampire tricks? I growled at him, too low for Bella to hear. I could hear Emmett laughing from upstairs as Rosalie let out a sigh of disgust. Though I'd wanted Bella to meet everyone, if they were going to act like children it was better they keep to themselves. I hope you haven't been showing off, it's rude. Esme said firmly, bringing me back to the present. It was always amusing when she switched into mom mode, just a bit. I laughed, grinning from ear to ear and beaming at Bella. I never needed to hide anything anymore. She liked it when I was myself. Told you love makes you giggle like an idiot. Welcome to the club. Esme was smirking at me and I just laughed again. I was all right with looking like an idiot if I got to feel like this. He's been too modest, actually, said Bella, defending me. Well, play for her. Esme added cheerfully, looking at me with excited eyes. You just said showing off was rude. I reminded her. There are exceptions to every rule. Of all the things you should be proud of. Edward. I knew there was no way I was getting out of it, and truthfully I was excited to finally play for Bella. Not because I wanted her to be impressed, but because the most beautiful music I'd ever written was all because of her. 81. It's settled then. Esme said, taking my free hand and dragging me toward the piano. Bella's hand was still clutched tightly in mine and I didn't let go until she was sitting beside me. With one last quick squeeze I let go, looking longingly at her, and she scooted closer to me. I began with Esme's song since I knew she'd been hoping to hear it. She loved when I played. Bella watched me, eyes wide and mouth hanging open. My family laughed and I listened to their mixed reactions. I knew she'd like it. He's just showing off again. Look how happy he is, playing for her. We should really let them be alone. This is a special moment. Their thoughts blurred together again as I heard Carlyle lead their quiet exit. I looked over at Bella and she was still gaping as my fingers moved across the keys. When her eyes met mine I winked at her playfully. Do you like it? You wrote this? She asked, astonished, and I nodded. It's Esme's favorite. I told her. It was my favorite too, before your song. She closed her eyes and hung her head, looking strangely forlorn. I couldn't understand what had upset her. What's wrong? I'm feeling extremely insignificant. She whispered. Immediately I slowed my fingers and carefully blended the end of Esme's song into the beginnings of her lullaby. It was softer, gentler, and not as ornate. I had tried to capture her pureness, her innocence in every note, though I knew no sounds in this world could ever do her justice. You inspired this one. I breathed, looking at her with all the love I was feeling. Surely she could see it, hear it in her song. Without her they were just notes, but she gave them life. She gave everything in my life meaning. As I continued to play softly, her expression smoothed and she looked content. It was bringing her happiness, just like when I had sung her the simple melody as she was drifting off to sleep. They like you, you know. I told her, hoping she realized just how completely she had already been accepted. Esme especially. She looked behind her and noticed for the first time that we were alone. "Where did they go?" she asked, slightly concerned. "Very subtly giving us some privacy. I suppose. And gossiping upstairs about things that really should be none of their business." Her face once again looked defeated, though I couldn't imagine how the day could have been any more successful. "They like me. But Rosalie and Emmett," she trailed off. I refused to let her spend 1 second agonizing over what Rosalie thought. I'd given up wasting my energy trying to figure out her mind decades ago, and I had the advantage of a first-hand look into it. Complete nonsense. 82. "Don't worry about Rosalie," I said. Trying to convince her there was no point. "She'll come around. Or she will do a very good job of pretending to accept Bella." As much as I didn't want to abuse my powers, my insight into her thoughts had let me in on a few things she probably wouldn't want made into public knowledge. I was sure I could persuade her to put on a big smile and welcome Bella with open arms. Not that I was going to let her touch her. "Emmett," she asked, watching me closely. "Well, he thinks I'm a lunatic. It's true, but he doesn't have a problem with you. He's trying to reason with Rosalie. What is it that upsets her?" "What doesn't?" I thought, sighing. "Rosalie struggles the most with what we are. It's hard for her to have someone on the outside know the truth." I paused for a second, wondering if I should continue. It didn't seem fair to Rosalie, but I knew it would help Bella with at least one of her insecurities. And really, Rose hadn't even bothered to come down today. It served her right, having one of her secrets out. And she's a little jealous. I continued, feeling only a slight twinge of guilt. "Rosalie is jealous of me?" she asked, shocked. She looked as if she were trying to figure out a complex math problem in her head. Did she really think Rosalie was all that special? I couldn't understand it, but maybe I'd just spent too many years listening to her whine. Emmett was the only thing that made her tolerable at all. "You're human," I said, shrugging indifferently. "She wishes that she were, too." It was the least embarrassing and the most easily explained reason. Everything else was basically laughable. I may not care much for her, but I wasn't going to divulge anything that would humiliate her. "Oh," she said, and I was relieved she finally let one thing go without the whole Inquisition bit. "Even Jasper, though, that's really my fault," I told her, wishing I had just let Jasper be himself. As it turned out, he was too busy making fun of me to pay much attention to her smell. "I told you he was the most recent to try our way of life." I warned him to keep his distance. Her eyes were frozen on me as she processed that. I hoped it wouldn't upset her, but obviously everyone had been on their best behavior, so she really shouldn't worry. She shivered slightly but seemed to talk herself out of any further reaction. "Esme and Carlisle," she asked, "are happy to see me happy." I assured her. I wished for a moment she could step inside Esme's mind the way I could, so she could see her utter elation watching Bella and I together. Actually, Esme wouldn't care if you had a third eye and webbed feet. All this time she's been worried about me, afraid that there was something missing from my essential makeup, that I was too young when Carlisle changed me. She's ecstatic. "Every time I touch you," she just about chokes with satisfaction. She smiled, obviously pleased by Esme's approval. If only she knew how much they already cared about her, how Carlisle had already started thinking of her as family. I wanted to try to explain it, but thought she'd be better off learning it on her own over time. She probably wouldn't believe me anyway. "Alice seems very enthusiastic," she said with a wide smile. In that second I knew Alice was going to be right again, although I'd never truly doubted it. It was one of her most confident visions, and now it was absolute. They were going to be wonderful friends. 83. "Alice has her own way of looking at things," I said, attempting to hide the sea of images that took over my every thought. It was no use. She knew me too well. "And you're not going to explain that, are you?" she asked, not missing a beat. All I could do was stare at her, because of course I couldn't explain. What was I going to say? "I know you two just met, but Alice already loves you so much she's picking out your wedding dress." She stared at me, waiting for a response I wasn't prepared to give. Finally she sighed and asked, "So what was Carlisle telling you before?" She really didn't miss anything. "You noticed that, did you?" "Of course," she said in that nonchalant tone I was starting to get used to. I had hoped to have her safely back in her house, curled up in my arms again before telling her about the danger that was coming. But I figured everything else had been so easy. She could probably handle one more of my realities. He wanted to tell me some news. He didn't know if it was something I would share with you. Will you? She asked, already pleading with her eyes. She couldn't stand to be left out of anything. It was like a strange, sick fascination with all things vampire. I have to. I sighed. Because I'm going to be a little, overbearingly protective over the next few days or weeks. Or the rest of your life, but who's counting? And I wouldn't want you to think I'm naturally a tyrant. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, exactly. Alice just sees some visitors coming soon. They know we're here, and they're curious. Visitors. Her voice was starting to crack just a little, and I wished yet again that I could shield her from the truth of what's really out there. As unsettling as her unrelenting acceptance of us was, I was glad it was strong enough to keep her fears away. It was allowing her to sit with me in my house, with my family, and be a part of my life in a way I'd never expected possible. It made me feel almost normal. If she started to comprehend what the rest of them were really like, if they confirmed all her preconceived notions as to what vampires were really capable of. I was afraid she might rethink the situation she was letting herself walk into. Yes, I paused, trying to phrase my words carefully. Well, they aren't like us, of course, in their hunting habits. I mean, they probably won't come into town at all, but I'm certainly not going to let you out of my sight till they're gone. Her nerves finally got the best of her and her whole body shook. It looked like she was trying to forget a nightmare she'd just woken up from. I didn't like seeing her scared, but in a way it was good to see her react reasonably for once. Finally, a rational response. I said under my breath. I was beginning to think you had no sense of self-preservation at all. As much as I hated knowing she was frightened, it was nice to see she at least recognized real danger when it was there. I'd like to think she was never afraid of me because deep down, even before I knew, she must have felt certain that I would never be capable of hurting her. She recovered from the scare easily, and resumed her examination of the house. Her eyes were still wide and unbelieving as she took it all in. Still, she seemed happy here, and I was reminded. 84, again of how lucky I was to have her. Different as our worlds were. She fit in so perfectly already, it gave me hope for our future. The impossible was feeling more and more possible every second. Not what you expected, is it? I said, noting the way she was scrutinizing every inch of the space. It was probably the exact opposite of Hollywood's idea of the vampire mansion. No, she smiled, her gaze stopping to linger on the staircase leading to the unknown parts of our home, undoubtedly curious. No coffins, no piled skulls in the corners. I don't even think we have cobwebs. What a disappointment this must be for you. I teased. It's so light. So open, we loved the openness of it, thrived on being able to let the sunlight in when we could so rarely enjoy it any other way. The glass walls facing the forest allowed us to be a part of the world, while still enjoying the sanctity of privacy. It's the one place we never have to hide. I told her, looking deeply into her eyes as I finished her lullaby. I almost hadn't realized I was still playing, but feeling it come to an end added an emptiness to the air. I wished I could fill her life with music and beauty every moment of every day. She deserved to be surrounded by it, wrapped up in its grace the way her beauty always held me. Thank you, she said softly as the final chord lingered around us. I could hear it for longer than her, the way it blended perfectly into the stillness of the room. As I gazed into her adoring eyes, I noticed she was nearly crying. It was the first time I'd seen her moved to tears, and it was so beautiful I reached out to her without thinking. She quickly wiped most of them away, embarrassed for reasons I would never understand, but when I touched her cheek lightly right below her eye I felt a single moist drop on my finger. She'd just shown me yet another side of herself, and I was deeply grateful. The small tear felt like such an important part of her that I was overcome with the desire to taste her on my lips again. Rather than kissing her, because honestly I wasn't yet ready for another one of her unexpected responses, I put the tear in my mouth, tasting her sweet saltiness. She looked at me confused, but it wasn't something I thought I could explain properly, so I hastily changed the subject to something I knew would get her mind off of it. Do you want to see the rest of the house? I said cheerfully. No coffins? She asked with a smile, though I could hear a hint of real curiosity in her voice. I took her hand.